Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I'm very excited. I have a returning guest, and I was very excited to talk about their book when they were on the podcast previously. It was Wolfpitch, and it was fantastic. And so he's got another book coming out August 26th. It's called A Bite of Pepper, and I loved it. I can't wait to discuss it. We're going to talk all about it right now. But please, welcome back to the podcast, Balazs Lorinczi. Balazs, how you doing today?
I'm very good, Jimmy. Thank you for having me again. I very much appreciate it.
No, I'm excited to have you back on and to talk about, A Bite of Pepper. I was such a fan when, you were on previously, and it was one of those wonderful discoveries for me that I love about the podcast. I mean, there's just, I've said it a million times, there are so many great writers and artists and cartoonists working right now. There's so many great comics and graphic novels, and it's almost impossible to kind of to discover and to read everything and discover everybody. And I had not been familiar with your work before. And I think it might have been Holly Atchison that kind of connected us. And I loved that comic so much. I had such a great time talking to you and was so glad when you reached out that you had another graphic novel coming out. And A Bite of Pepper, I thought it's such a fun, wonderful story. I love that you tell these really kind of relationship, kind of coming into your own type of tales with this supernatural element that you don't really get bogged down into any lore in terms of your world. There's probably a little more with A Bite of Pepper about how vampires work in the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just thought it was another great story. Love the relationship that we see with Pepper and Miss White, whose name just escaped me. But yeah, the whole family dynamic, everything. I just thought another wonderful graphic novel. So tell listeners, what is A Bite of Pepper all about?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I don't know if it's showing on the camera, but I'm pretty sure I'm blushing really hard. So I'm really glad you liked it. I remember you were very kind about Wolfpitch as well, and you named it on your end of year list as well, which made me super happy. So when I sent you the PDF for this new one, I was like, if Jimmy doesn't like this, I did something wrong. And I was like, I really hope that you're gonna enjoy this one as well. But yeah, as you mentioned, the lore building, this one has a bit more to it. But basically, the book is about Pepper, the titular character, who is a young vampire who was born a vampire. And in this book, as part of the lore building, if someone is born a vampire, they need to turn another person into a vampire so they can themselves become immortal. Otherwise, they just keep aging. And the whole book is about Pepper not wanting to do that because she's not sure about what she wants to do in the future. And at the start of the story, she meets Anna, who is an artist who is from a different social background than she is. And they together decide to start a business venture relating to skateboarding, because that's Pepper's main thing. She's a young vampire girl who likes to skateboard. And the book explores basically Pepper's relationship with Anna, with her mom, her brother Jeb, and how they develop this business and how it keeps changing their life, basically. It's I called it, I'm pretty sure that made it into the copy as well, a coming of age, becoming a vampire story.
Right. I mean, yeah, a couple of things I want to talk about. And I mentioned this to you before we started recording, that I really thought when they were forming the business, I'd said to you, I wonder how much of you kind of coming up with the idea and pitching it was then kind of recycled, because when they're talking about combining skateboarding and vampirism, and they're like, oh, I don't know if I've ever seen this before, because usually you think of the aesthetics of vampires from Bram Stoker's original novel, very gothic. or even some of the later heavy duty vampire mythology like Masquerade or things along those
Yeah.
lines.
Interview
It's
with Vampire.
Interview with the Vampire. It's all very, very different than kind of like, I mean, maybe outside a little bit of like the 1980s Lost Boys.
Lost
It's
Boys and like Blade and John
right,
Carpenter's Vampires, which are like kind of reactionary to the classic, like Bram Stoker, like the Bela
sure,
Lugosi, the Hammer horror one, and even like Anne Rice's and like the movie Interview with the Vampire, kind of like it all leaning into that aesthetic. And then in the 90s and like the late 80s was Lost Boys, right? Like 87 or something like that.
yeah, it
It's
was mid to
kind of,
late 80s. Yeah,
especially I feel like Blade and I don't know if you're familiar with John Carpenter's Vampires, which
yep,
is I feel like I'm like the only fan of that movie sometimes, but that's very much like a reaction to the gothic vampire. Like this is not your granddaddy's vampires. It's not the
right,
dusty old crosses and garlics. It's more like a new modern like techno vampires in Blade and like the southern kind of like just be grindhouse type in John Carpenter's.
right,
I feel like they have a conversation with each other. While what I was doing here, it was but all those movies, they are all handling the vampires as monsters. It's all like against the vampires, or like in Interview with the Vampire, it's clear that they are evil. They obviously that story and that series explores different things compared to like Blade or Dracula or Lost Boys, when a vampire is an opponent that we have to
sure,
defeat. Well,
right,
personally, I was more about like the origin of it is more like an aesthetic thing. Like, oh, it's a vampire, and like skateboarding is just a thing I'm interested in because I used to do it when I was a kid. And it was kind of like a marriage of the two that when I randomly put them together when I was doing a drawing once, not
right.
even just like a comic, just like a drawing. I was like, oh, this is something. And the
Yeah,
other thing,
and
go on, sorry.
also because Pepper is younger, and the other folks that she either they're kids or younger people that she skateboards with, like it's more geared towards that. It's almost like you have a very young, fresh skateboarding like surfer almost like aesthetic, and like that's who the brand is kind of like marketing towards. So
Yeah,
everything is like the tricks, like the wings. It's just very interesting aesthetic that I haven't quite seen before. And also your vampires, like you said, with a lot of the movies, the vampires are the opponents. It almost seems like the vampires of your world have fairly integrated
yeah,
well with humans, and you know, at least from the ball or the gala scenes we see, it almost seem to be like a bit of their own class. It reminded me of very like aristocratic, although I don't know if that was like the case in practice because, Piper's mom has like a used bookshop and,
it's like
so it
upper
was,
middle class at least.
yeah,
None of the vampires, obviously not. There's not a ton of them. I don't really explore the whole like society of vampires in the story. But every time when we see other vampires, nobody is like hobo, and that's implied because the main vampires we see is Pepper and her family, her mom and her brother, and especially her brother is kind of like a grifter. We call him a grifter. He's like they
yeah,
always have some like business plans. He's very important to like them actually starting this business, and that I wanted that to contrast to Anna's character, who clearly is coming from a different background, who the whole vampire thing to her is more about like a social climbing thing, which
right,
is, to be fair, it's a very common thing with vampires, because like obviously with Dracula, who was like an aristocrat, or Carmilla, Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, that was all about like high society stuff as well.
sure,
Interview with the Vampire, I think they work, if I remember correctly, it's been a while for that. So vampires and high society I think it's a very common thing,
yeah,
but mainly I kind of leaned into that not to kind of suggest anything in this case. Like the vampire elite type of thing.
yeah.
That
No, it
wasn't
doesn't
my intention.
ever. There's no indication in the story that it gets to that level. You're not implying that, but yeah, it does. Pepper does seem like she's from like a comfortable background, which
Yes.
really creates a nice contrast with Anna, who is like doesn't seem to have her family around. It's kind of struggling as an artist, struggling to put herself through school, like working a
So,
bunch of different
we see her
jobs.
first as a waitress. Her
Yeah,
introduction is
yeah,
being a waitress, while Pepper is attending the gala. being part of the higher society where Anna is being a server.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously there's that thing there. But I think because I don't handle vampires as the villains, it doesn't come off as they are the vampire elite, they are the 1%. It's just more about like contrasting these two backgrounds and see how the characters kind of react to each other.
Right.
That mainly was important because I wanted Pepper to be someone who is upper middle class, has basically everything that she can ask for to do something with her life. She can do whatever she wants, basically. And then she still kind of just like feels like she doesn't know what she's doing and kind of
Yeah.
constantly making bad decisions and just being grumpy about everything.
Well, I really like the explanation when the only really bit of like vampire lore or exposition is when Anna asks to find out more about vampires and the turning, and Pepper kind of explains, what it is. Like you already said, a vampire who is not already a human that becomes turned, but is born a vampire. They have to turn another vampire, and then they're basically immortal from that period on. And you do such a wonderful job with Pepper kind of explaining her hesitancy, that you basically like, you do this kind of wonderful analogy about a crystal and, how she doesn't feel like she's ready to be crystallized yet. Like she doesn't feel like she's fully formed, which I mean is not just something that a young person goes through. I mean, I know fully formed adults who still kind of struggle with that.
That is the genesis of the book. The genesis of the concept of a skateboarding vampire was me sketching and then listening to lo-fi music, and that's where the color comes from, kind of lo-fi aesthetic. But
I love the colors in this. I
thank you.
love your color palette for it. I
No, no,
apologize for interrupting, but I just loved it.
I appreciate the positive comments. And no worries.
But go ahead.
That's where the aesthetic comes from. But the narrative itself is when I was trying to basically like just thinking about like just my own life, and that's when I was working on Wolfpitch, basically like drawing Wolfpitch while I was developing the story for Pepper, because I felt like I could do something with this concept of a skateboarding vampire. And I was thinking like vampires, immortals, like they tend to be immortal, they don't age. I'm like, wait a second, what does it mean if you're born a vampire? But you can make rules, I guess, if you make a vampire story that they are dead and they can't procreate. But I didn't want that. I felt that's too bleak. I wanted to be, kind of cute, kind of something that a warmer environment. So I was like, okay, what happens if you're born a vampire? When do you stop aging? That was like literally my first thought. I was like, that could be something like a point that in a vampire's life when their aging stops, that could be significant. And I was thinking, oh, it's kind of like when you decide what you want to be in life or any major life decision. So like you can be 20 years old and then you find yourself maybe a very extreme example, like if you're a woman finding yourself pregnant and then like, oh wow, do I keep this baby? Obviously Pepper doesn't deal with these issues, but it's the same thought process of I feel I'm very young and I need to make a like very, very harsh decision, or even just like what university do I go? That's a better example. What university do I go to? Or do I marry this person? Or do I take this job that, gonna be the next, I don't know how many years of my life, could be the rest of my life. And I was 35, 4, something like that. I can't remember. Time is a weird thing. Roughly 35-ish. And I was thinking, I did not get published until I was like 34. Didn't seriously start making comics until that point, like 33, when I started. I was like, I'm gonna do this. When I started work on my first book, Donuts and Doom. And I thought, I think this should be a story about kind of like having to make this decision, but not wanting to, and exploring, do you have to? Basically.
Right.
And I didn't want it to be a certain, like a lecture. Is like, will Pepper make a mistake not making this decision, or will not? What's gonna happen? So that was like the genesis of like when you come to this like coming of age, having to make this decision, and the turning, becoming an immortal vampire. That's what it represents, and that's where the whole crystallization thing came from.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very effective, and I mean, there's other great elements that you've kind of like infused into the story, like that informs Pepper's character because um there's she's dealing with misconceptions about being a vampire. Like she also is kind of hesitant for the turning because she likes to do all these tricks, and there's a certain element of danger or apprehension about skateboarding
Yeah,
and landing a certain trick. And so she doesn't want to lose that. She doesn't want to lose kind of that fear, I think, because she thinks it'll make her or won't make it as exciting because then she can just do them. But she's dealing with like other people at the skate park in terms of her peer group who just think because she's a vampire, it's like not a big deal that she's landing all these tricks. Like they already think that she has some type of like ability or power. So you've infused all of these other things into her character that is something else that I thought, the same thing with Wolfpitch. Like your characters are so I feel like fully fleshed out. I mean, Anna going through her backstory and like some of the way her and Pepper's first meeting when they kind of have this like meet cute
yeah.
at the ball and end up on the roof. Like she feels already within a couple of pages like a fully formed, person. Which I think is tremendous work, not just in the writing, but like in the cartooning of it, as well. Like I really feel like these are I feel like after reading a 200 and some page graphic novel that it's the equivalent of having spent months getting to know these folks in just these pages. It's very impressive. Um, Even the way Anna like responds to Jeb and how Pepper responds to Jeb. There's so much in your interactions that you do with, a couple of pages that I feel you really bring across these characters um
Oh, sorry. I don't know if
in
I
a great
mentioned
way.
it. Jeb is. I can't remember if you named him, but Jeb is Pepper's brother.
Right. Yeah, Jeb is Pepper's brother. We meet him, I think, before we meet him early. Well, not before Pepper, but we meet him very early on.
Just
And
for the listeners, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier when I was
yeah,
talking about it. That's his name,
yeah,
Pepper's half brother.
yeah. Jeb's Pepper's brother. He's the one that you referred to earlier as the grifter.
If
And
that's the guy, yeah.
yeah, I mean he has a very interesting um not flattering introduction in the book, but I feel like his character has some interesting turns in this as well, especially when it comes to them trying to like form this business that they decide to form, this skateboarding, brand. Um
Yeah, the main goal with Jeb and Pepper's mom Spearmint was that they kind of like antagonistic characters from Pepper's perspective, especially Jeb, because
yeah.
they are siblings, so that's like a sibling thing of just slugging each other constantly. But I was hoping that they're not gonna come off either of them as villains. I was consciously making writing decisions of like, oh, I could easily turn this into like one of them being an actual antagonist in the story, but I didn't want to do that because I just wanted them to feel antagonistic from Pepper's point of view, to give that like sometimes young people think everyone is against them, wanting to force like them
Hmm.
to do something they don't want to. But I wanted Jeb to be ultimately someone who like, oh yeah, he has good points. He's not a bad guy. He's just a bit of a jerk sometimes.
Right.
A bit sleazy.
Yeah, a little, certainly. Well, I mean, it's interesting. There really isn't like a villain per se. I mean, but so much of the conflict is like Pepper's internal, conflict, whether or not it's the pressure she feels from her mother, the pressure she feels from society, the pressure she's putting on herself, just trying to figure out like what it is she wants to do. Um, there's all of this like wonderful kind of internal conflict from Pepper trying to figure stuff out. And I like that you kind of let Pepper be messy. She's not somebody that is going to always get it right. Like that's part of the appeal, I think, of Pepper feeling like a real living and breathing character. Maybe an odd thing to say about a vampire, but that she like
Yeah,
she's a little she's kind of like messy. And I loved trying to going on that journey with her as she at least tries to figure things out a little bit, you know? Yeah, so I don't know.
Uh,
I don't really have a question there. I just thought that was
I'm
very well
really,
done.
really happy that you got all that out of it, and then you think that the characters work, because that's kind of like the main thing with the book. It's not a book with a heavy plot. It's not really a book about like, plot twists. It's just characters like interacting with each other. Like I really, really try to out of like, this is my third book, but I already have a fourth finished, and I'm working on the pitch of the fifth one and the sixth at the same time. And this feels like the most slice of lifey out of all of them. Like
Okay.
every time when I was writing it, and I got to a point where I'm like, I know things have to happen here, I have to move forward, etc. The main thing wasn't like always like what the plot needs. It's always more what the characters need. And I was
Yeah.
consciously trying to be like, that's why I was saying earlier, like no one is really a villain in it. Because if I had a
Yeah.
villain, they could have easily been just like, oh, this character is scheming, and everyone is reacting to the scheming. It's more just like everyone has to make their own decisions. How would that work out?
Right.
There is some physical action in a sense of skateboarding, for example. Like it's not just people sitting around the table eating noodles or stuff like that.
No, I mean your work in terms of because you're doing really like everything, you know, in terms of putting this book together. But no, there is like wonderful action in this. Like the skateboarding stuff is great. There's a wonderful scene where Pepper is flying with Anna. There's like Anna for what some reason has to like carry Pepper through the city. There's
Yeah.
a lot of fun stuff going on. One of the things I wanted to say is, you're writing characters that are younger, which, I mean, any writer can kind of get into the head and take on characters of, you know, any age. Um,
I used to
but
be
I
young once myself.
sure, right? But I know I do think trying to write and capture like young people sometimes, or when as you get older and kind of get, you know,
A bit
further
out of
away from
touch.
those things. Yeah, a little bit. Not that you're old or out
No,
of
yeah,
touch
I
by
know,
any
absolutely know what you mean.
I'm an old man, but not, you know, not you're not old by any stretch of the imagination, but how you write Pepper and Anna and Jeb, I thought you do a really good job, especially with Pepper, I think, capturing like some of the attitude and sass of like a particular age. I will say though that um I think you're a little bit above maybe the target demographic with your Titanic reference.
Oh, I thought it's universal. That became a meme. Like Titanic,
Now
come on, that's one of the highest grossing movies of all time. It
yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I saw that and I was like, I mean, it's a great reference, and I'm like,
in Wolfpitch, I referenced the 1999 Mummy movie with Brendan
yeah,
Fraser. Like, I think that's a bit more obscure. Um,
yeah,
I think all my next book is just all of, like, John Carpenter references. I just can't, like,
oh,
literally the main thing is like just I can't escape that. Well, I felt like Titanic. Maybe they're gonna get it. We'll
yeah.
see.
Now
We'll see. Like,
I appreciated it. I thought it was perfectly placed. It was done very very well. I'm just teasing you a little bit, but
anyone who is
I liked
listening,
it.
anyone who's listening to this and happens to read the book and you're younger, just write me on Instagram. Just like, I got it. That's it. Just like, write, I got it. If I get one message like that, I'm gonna be happy. But to be valid point, um, I, I, I was hoping if maybe the editorial would point this out, but they said no. They pointed out a lot of other things. So
Yeah.
I was working on a different publisher on this book. Really, but nothing bad to say about Top Shelf, who I worked before and work on the next book as well. But yeah, it was a unique experience working with McElderry Books on this one.
Uh huh.
So I just thought I would shout them out. Kate Prosima, my editor, and Michael, the graphic designer, and Andrina, the assistant editor. They were all like amazing, and my agent Brent as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, credit to everybody. Again, I absolutely loved it. We haven't talked about Shroom, who I thought like what a wonderful, perfect addition. Shroom is, I guess, the family or you know Pepper's pet, kind of vampire dog, I guess.
Vampire
But like,
dog, definitely a vampire. Is more important to the plot than you would think. It's in a certain aspect. Shroom was
yeah,
always there. Shroom was in the very, very first drawing I did of Pepper. With Shroom, Shroom looks different on that drawing, more fluffy. But I had to scale him down so I can draw him on every single panel. But originally he was a very floppy dog. But that was the main concept of vampire girl who kind of has that like the original inspiration was that kind of like Tokyo fashion type thing. That's where the buns come from. It's not like a Mickey Mouse reference or anything.
okay.
And with the hoodie and with the dog who has wings and just being just a little rascal.
Oh yeah,
Little dog with bat wings. That was like the thing. Like, I think that's something. I think I should put that in the book.
oh yeah. I like from I think we see Shroom earlier on,
Yeah, like
but
which
like in
one?
the
Which one he's on?
yeah, in the very beginning. But when he's introduced and he just when Pepper after she meets Anna and then Pepper calls him and he just kind of like bursts from the window in the background. And like I do you ever are there things like that with Shroom where you want to include him and like having to draw him over and over again? Because like there's sometimes when Shroom is like not involved at all, and you just have him there. He's like lying on the floor, like sleeping or doing something else. Like, are you ever like, do I really need Shroom in this panel, or did you just love having him there?
The opposite. So there were a
Okay.
few chapters of Shroom is missing from the action because maybe they are at a skate park and they're not gonna take. I mean, they could have taken it, but I think the scene was busy enough not to have including Shroom there. Because yeah, in the skate park scenes, for example, or any skating scenes, if I would include Shroom just to chill out in the background, I think that would be distracting.
Hmm.
Because is that a Simpsons reference? It's like I would they're talking about a movie, and like I always like if that character is not on the screen, I want the audience to ask, where is that character? Do you
Okay.
know?
Yeah.
Is it a Simpsons reference?
Uh.
I was really paraphrasing here.
No.
I can't remember
I.
what. It's like a very famous like bad writing like joke basically. Like if the movie is about main character, every time the main character is not on the screen, I want the audience to ask where is main character. And I was kind of like that with Shroom. Every time
Okay.
he's not involved in something, I was asking, why is Shroom not involved? Because I like drawing him. He's a cute little dog with bat wings. But I think he would be distracting if I put him everywhere. But there was like stretches in the book where I'm like, I will need to include him in the future because he does have a role in the narrative, basically. I don't want to spoil it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's a hint at it. But kind of he always had the role of like the little squirrel creature in Nausicaa. I don't know how to say it. You know the Ghibli movie, Nausicaa
Oh.
Valley of the Wind,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I know what you mean.
she finds this like squirrel creature early on, and she just keeps having it with her all throughout the movie. So that was kind of like that's the role Shroom basically feels that just to have something that is hopefully cute.
Oh no, very, very. When you're doing something like this, a story like this where we talked about there isn't like really a villain, the conflict, a lot of it, you know, certainly there's a climax because you're getting to this gala and the idea of the turning. Um, was there one part of the story that was more difficult for you to crack than any other? Like when you don't have like a character facing off to resolve that conflict when it comes from more of like an internal struggle and like how is Pepper going to deal with some of these things? Not to give away any of the plot, just like for you from like putting the story together was, did you like work on this kind of chronologically or like from an outline? Did you have the ending and work back? Like was there a part of it that was more difficult to crack?
Yeah, the ending is definitely like not even the emotional ending, sort of. So the previous two books I did, they both end in like a concert. Donuts and them and Wolfpitch. They're climactic scenes are both at like a live music performance. That's where the character arcs culminate. That's the main action of it. Even
Right.
in Wolfpitch, they defeat the villain there, quote unquote. In Bite of Pepper, we didn't have a villain. We didn't have that type of scene. So the original idea was kind of like a more emotional catharsis between the two main characters, which was originally in my head played out as a conversation that kind of gonna have an emotional weight enough so the reader gonna feel satisfied with it. But as I was doing the paneling, because the way I write, I usually have an outline and then I start working on the actual page because I want to see how the dialogue flows on the page. And a lot of times when I start just roughly sketching out the characters on the page as I was writing on it, it's like a very like chaotic thing. Like I put in dialogue and sometimes I sketch in stuff. Because if I see just in a couple lines how the characters, what faces they make, body language, composition on the page, it kind of like changes sometimes how I do the story, or like put gags in it that I didn't plan originally to put in there, stuff like that. And
Okay.
when I was doing these rough outlines and writing the dialogue, I was like, I just have 15 pages, two people yapping. They just talking to each other. So like, this is not working, basically. It doesn't feel satisfying to the story. And basically what I realized is we need physical action that kind of represents what they are going through. So even though, and at that point, I actually had like 50 full pages at least done, like colors and everything. Because I sometimes I work in blocks, do like 30 pages of just full finished pages and then get back into the writing, especially when I know where the story is heading. I know exactly what plot beat's going to happen. I just need to flesh out those scenes, what the actual
Okay.
dialogue is, etc. And at that point, I was like, I know where the story is going. I can start drawing and coloring and everything else. And then I realized, oh no, I actually don't have the ending. I thought I have the ending. And then you have to go back and then you're like, is there anything that maybe I can reincorporate that I didn't think to reincorporate? The solution in this case was mainly to include some form of physical action. That could, it's not just going to be two people talking, sitting down and talking. There's going to be something more interesting involved. And obviously physical action, when I say physical action, it can be anything. It can be, in this case, it's, I don't want to spoil it. Not like I could spoil it, but you know which scene I'm talking about on the rooftop.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
It could be, again, in an action movie, it would be a fight scene. It could be an action movie, a chase scene. In a sports movie, it's like the final, the game, basketball game or whatever. Or in my previous books, it's the final performance where things come to head. So I felt like this needed another something like that. And then after that, we had kind of like, not even an epilogue. It's more just like, let's kind of wrap things up character-wise. And I had the ending, but then when we got to the editing part of the book, my editor Kate kind of sent me an email with like an essay, basically analyzing my book, which great editor, because I was like, wow, she gets it, and she has this really great points. And she said, I see what you're doing. It's not working the way you want to work. And she proposed a complete rewrite, which would have led me to discard like 50 pages of the book, fully finished pages. So I had a bit of a panic attack. And then I got
Okay.
over that and I sat down and I said, what if I take all your points and see how I can make it work with the story I have? And basically, I only discarded a couple of pages that got replaced with something else that worked better, and actually added like 15 extra pages, and then rearranged some other stuff to kind of, because she said, yeah, it's there what you want to say, it just not rendered in the right way. It's not properly laid out. So kind of like expanded the ending.
Okay.
The emotional after that action scene, basically what happens. That's the main thing that got expanded. So it was kind of like a choppy process. It wasn't as straightforward as I would prefer it to be.
Right.
But because I got a second pair of eyes on it with Kate, and Michael and Andrea kind of like agreeing with Kate and saying like, yes, this is what should happen. And then I had the opportunity to kind of brainstorm it with them. what we should do, made it a better story, in my opinion, and a more full story.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that I can imagine getting like notes or getting an essay, getting an email, and like the thought of having to redo or do something different or toss out like 50 finished pages when you're doing everything. So um
By the way, that what they proposed was great.
right.
And on the one side, I just got to panic at that because some of those pages were like quite hard to draw. So, but you know the saying like "kill your darlings," and like if you have to try
Yeah.
50 pages to make the story better, but there was an element of the story that was about time passing that was
Yeah.
very important to me to have a bit in the before the third act when the characters and the readers experience time passing. Not the whole story doesn't just take place within like 1 week. Like I want it to be. That's an important element because it's coming of age. Time is involved with that, and the perspective that time gives you, and what you go through when you think you only have a compressed amount of time to the short time to make a decision, and what happens if you go over that.
Right.
And that would have been eliminated with their proposed changes. It wasn't a bad idea what they proposed, but because it didn't involve time passing, I was like, let's come up with something else. And I really hope that when people read this book, they're gonna feel like that's an important element of the story, that the characters go through this time skip.
Okay. Yeah, I really loved, I mean, to kind of key into that, there's a say, to not give away story elements, but there is a section where we're just focusing on Pepper and Shroom, and it's towards the end of the book. And um, Pepper's out taking a walk, and you have this like um, at least when I was reading it, this really beautiful kind of transition where Pepper's looking at her phone, and then it's like a look, like we're taking a long look at Pepper, almost like walking away from the reader, and there's no panel border; it's just all white. And then you kind of have like a page. I think it's a page or two of just a couple of leaves, as
Yeah.
we're now transitioning through the seasons, and or at least through another season into fall and winter. But the use of those two pages with those like sparse leaves on it, though, I just thought was like just a wonderful thing in comics to kind of like convey, you know, time is passing. Like everyone understands the seasons, and I just thought, you know, when you're talking about like the economy of storytelling sometimes, which we talk about on this podcast, and like you're trying to, tell a story succinctly, and you're
Yeah.
trying to you have only a certain number of pages, but to really
Especially in
have the
monthly issues. When you have
monthly issues, yeah,
yeah,
but when you
this
do have the time and space to do something like that and just kind of like use those 2 pages to get the reader into a place where, oh, we're taking a moment, we're taking a second, time is passing, things are happening like off the page. I just thought that was such like a kind of like a lovely touch to get into the next section of the book.
I'm glad you think that because I like to do that type of stuff, and I think the graphic novel format is. When I say graphic novel format, I mean like a book that's meant to be one whole book, not
Yeah,
like a 6-issue collection. I don't like to
right.
call that a graphic novel because just to clearly delineate the difference between formats. Nothing wrong with the 6-issue collection. I have a lot of them in the background. I
Yeah,
know,
I
I know
I
it's
I do too.
and I know it's a big debate, like what's a graphic novel? Why it's not comic? Every graphic novel is a
Right.
comic. I just think graphic novel is like a format thing. So the graphic novel format, I think it allows the author to kind of do things like that, which you don't necessarily have the opportunity to do when you do like a monthly issue thing. That's why I like kind of like never even like considered doing like trying to do monthly comics. I
Mhm.
always like thinking in graphic novel format because it allows me to do the type of pacing that I think would be best for the story. And in this one specifically, I think I do like a couple other, not like 2 pages when it's just leaves, but there's a couple other when it's just like one image on one page to kind of signify that time is passing. We are transitioning to another scene. I always think like I hope the reader's not gonna think that they're just getting an empty page here, the filler
Yeah.
page to pad up
Right.
the runtime basically.
I
Uh,
mean, I always appreciate it. I just, you're
I feel
this
like
is
some
how
stories need it.
yeah, and I mean, I kind of this is how the writer, the artist, the creators like kind of want you to experience the story. Like I definitely don't think anything is there for filler, but I think we have to have a I know sometimes there are fun, interesting ways to convey the passage of time that isn't just a narrative caption that's there's nothing wrong with, you know,
Whatever suits the story.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with, like, 3 months later, but I mean, it's nice sometimes to kind of do it in a different way or to kind of create some physical space and not just, a caption, but
Yeah, and a lot of comics is basically like because it's sequential art, so you're translating time into 2D art, into 2D space. The size of the panels, your compositions, how like is it a close up in a small panel? Is it like a larger panel with a lot of characters? They can all signify time. They all dictate the pacing, how much dialogue you put into a page, how little dialogue you put into a page. Do an empty page, etc., etc. A lot of making comics is like setting up how a page works is about kind of like carving out time on that page. Same with like movies obviously have a similar thing, but because movies we experience movies in time as the movie goes on, it's a bit different, but I think there's a lot of like parallels there. I think maybe Tarkovsky said something about like carving out time, like that's all he was doing. I might be again paraphrasing something. My references are horrible tonight. Uh,
it's okay.
but I was thinking a lot about that while I was doing this comic because it was
Yeah.
not it's not a plot heavy book where I have to hit the plot beats to move the story forward. I think I had more opportunity to like just kind of play around with time, which I hope it translates to the readers as well. Because yeah, as I
Yeah,
said
and
earlier, for me, time is an important narrative part of this story, to me at least.
no, I agree. I mean, I think there are a lot of because it isn't, as you said, like, plot heavy, I mean, I really think not only in terms of the idea of playing with time, but there's a lot I don't know if I would love to go back and look at like something like Wolfpitch and look at like this. I felt like and maybe just because it was fresher in my mind, there's a lot more close-ups in this, especially in terms of scenes with Anna and like Pepper um on the roof where there's a great like one page where Anna is getting like ready for something and you kind of see her getting ready and it's a lot of close-up panels. Um but
All
especially
the
with
different
Anna,
details, you mean? Like not just on
yeah.
the face, but like yeah.
Yeah, but I mean with like there's one in particular that really stood out to me with Anna and Pepper on the roof where we kind of see them close together and then I think Anna starts to like move forward and we just kind of like see a little the next panel is just a little bit of her and like some lines and maybe an effect like a whoosh or something along those lines, but there's um there's I felt like there was like a lot it allowed you to really focus a lot on like the detail. I mean, the facial expressions with Anna and especially Pepper are like tremendous. I mean,
Oh,
like Pepper is so like animated, whether or not she's excited or whether or not she's like grumpy. Like I really felt like there's just such like wonderful like cartooning, not cartoony, you know what I mean?
no, but
Like
yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
wonderful like art, like facial expression and facial acting with Pepper, like in particular, but
She's a little
Anna as
goblin.
well.
I
No, I
like drawing the
mean,
person who's a little goblin.
she absolutely is, and I mean, she just seems like she is, that there's so much like over the top kind of stuff, like not necessarily like her personality, but like her reactions to things. I felt were
Very
were
a
were
lot of
great.
excessive like exclamations sometimes.
Oh yeah, but even
Yeah.
like but even things that like when she is like some of the looks she gives Anna, where like it's just Pepper, and we know she's looking towards Anna, and she like gives her a bit of side eye. Or there's one panel in particular, I think she has like a soda, and you can clearly tell that she is rolling her eyes, and it's done like so well. It's like a that snapshot taken right at that perfect moment.
I'm glad that came through because I really wanted the characters to feel like kind of alive, to be relatable, or just like people who you want to spend time with. Like ultimately, like I was talking a lot like the last like 20 minutes about like carving out time and whatever art wanking I'm thinking, but ultimately this book is about just a vampire girl who is like have issues with growing up basically, and her family, and her new person of interest, and a cute dog, and like lo-fi vibes. Like I kind of wanted to one of the colors to be like, as if like you're listening to like lo-fi hip-hop music while you're skateboarding at night, that type of, but just I have that feel to it. That's the main thing. If I manage to communicate that and you feel like the characters are like relatable or alive, or you just want to hang out with them for 220 pages, everything else is secondary.
Well, I think if that was the assignment, I mean, I think you nailed it. I thought it was I loved it. I mean,
When
it
I
was
see
again, it's
secondary, I if people get more out of it and they think,
yeah.
oh, I like the aspect, I'm very, very happy. But my first mission with any book I do is I want you to want to finish the book. I want you to be involved enough, invested enough in this to get from the first page to the last page and care enough about these characters. That every single one I do. By the sound of it, at least with you, I managed. So I'm very, very happy about
Yeah,
that.
you got me on board. No, I thought it was great. And I'm sure I think it was I had on the podcast and I talked to sometimes Amy Chase, and I know Amy had reached out because Amy had read um Amy, who's going to she has a podcast episode coming up too, because she has a book, a graphic novel coming out. But Amy had read Wolfpitch after I told her about
Oh
it,
yes, yes,
and
yes, yes.
yeah, and so I'm sure I'm sure Amy will be picking up this one too, and I bet this is something Amy will love. So you'll have two. I'm sure you're going to have
I
Amy
hope
as
she will
well.
like it. I think she commented the other day on Blue Sky or X, I can't remember, which I was happy about. Um,
Yeah,
mentioning you that you recommended that. So I hope she will like it as well. And I
yeah.
hope other people will like it too.
Uh, I think so. I just thought it's a great story. I love the idea of Pepper's hesitancy, as I said before, Pepper's hesitancy with the turning, her explanation of not feeling like she's, ready to be crystallized, like she's fully formed yet. And you just have created kind of like a wonderful dynamic between her and Anna, who's Anna's like, a little fun, flirtsy with her a bit, but like Anna is like got a good head on her shoulders. She knows where she comes from. She knows how hard she's worked to kind of get there. It's like a real interesting dynamic with the two of them. And yeah, I thought it was great. And your artwork, your coloring work, I mean, really, really shines in this story. Like even if you're somebody who's like, yeah, coming of age vampire tale is not anything I'm interested in. If you're in any way listening to this and you know just want like wonderful art to kind of go through 224 pages of, I mean, pick this up. It is phenomenal.
Even after
There's so
listening
many
to
good
me
things.
just babble about like whatever nonsense I was just saying the last like 45 minutes, you still
There
want
are
to pick up the book.
there there are people there are a lot of folks that I hear from who listen to this podcast who love that, like love the process stuff, whether or not it's breaking a story to talk about storytelling, whether or not it's your process in terms of art. I think folks love figuring out kind of the, not really the mystery of it, but that level of detail. I think kind of breaking that down and being like, there's no one way to do it. Some
Yeah.
people outline, some people don't. Some, writers work with a certain artist and they'll script for a particular way for that artist. Someone like you, you're doing all of it. I know, artists that will write a full script and work off the script, or someone who will just get in and start kind of laying it out, and then once they lay the story out, then they go back in and do the dialogue. And there's no
Yeah.
one right way to do it. I think it's all kind of fascinating and interesting, and you kind of see. I'm fascinated by it. I like to see how the problems get worked out. Like, what did you struggle with and how did you figure it out? Like, what did you do? I had an ending that didn't quite work. This is what my editor said. I didn't want to get rid of these 50 pages. I had to figure out like what was key to this. What was the emotional key? What was the set piece that I wanted to do? And I had to figure out like how to make it work. And I think we did it in the end. Like, whatever that story is, I kind of like digging, into that. So I'll let you ramble on for 20, 25 of the whole 45 minutes because
Appreciate
I
it.
think it's interesting.
I was trying to be like not to be too vague, because that's just too abstract to figure out what the hell I'm talking about, but not to give away the story beats. But the main
Yeah.
thing was there is a scene when Anna runs out to the street, and it's like a crowded street from a restaurant, and that page took me like 3 days. And when they propose to that's be like the section that needs to be like chucked out, I just looked at it and
Right.
cried. I'm like, I don't want to get rid of this page. I worked so hard
Right.
on this. But to be fair, that wasn't the main thing. It was more about the time and the narrative thing. So I don't want to sound like I'm too precious about what I did.
No,
But
I don't
it's
think
an
I don't think you
emotional
sound like
attachment.
that at all, but that's the practical aspect of it too, right? Like, sometimes you mentioned it earlier, the idea of like you have to kill your darlings. Like, just because you like something doesn't mean it's like right for the story and you might have to get rid of it. But like, also there's the practical aspect of I, I'm I'm putting all this work into it. I've spent all this time on it, and now, do I have to get rid of 3, 4, 5 a week's worth of work, or longer? Like, is there something else that we can do because you've already, put all that time into it? And sometimes the answer is, yeah, we got to get rid of it. This story needs to go a certain way, and
Just to make myself sound a bit more professional. Well, I'm not sure if you're gonna, but I did kill one of my darlings. If someone goes through my social media, which I don't recommend, but if they do, they're probably gonna see sketches of. No, there's nothing there. Just I don't like people looking at my art that's like 6
I
years
just
old.
I just thought it was funny how you said it. But go ahead.
So
So if we go through
nothing
your
dodgy,
social media,
nothing dodgy on my social media, but you can see early drawings. You can see the first one of Pepper because it was like Instagram prompt thing. But there is one where I actually had another character in this book who was completely cut. Jeb's father was supposed to be part of the whole picture, but including that character, like I was like 50 pages into it, and as I was working out the rest of the story, I was like, okay, this is the bit where he's supposed to come in, but if I include him as I was planning to in my my draft, basically where I laid out the story beats, when I was
right?
actually working out how the scenes play out, I was like, this is going to be an extra 100 pages that takes the narrative to a completely different direction that we are going now. As I'm like realizing this is where we are going, as I'm fleshing out the characters, and like, for example, the skate park scene where the Pepper is talking to her friends who are kind of not appreciating her as a skateboarder. As I was
Yeah.
working out that scene, I'm like, oh, this is adding something to the narrative that I didn't necessarily realize it was there at the start. And I just realized, oh, if I add Jeb's father to the mix, as much as I in my head I like the character, and I actually have character drawings of him on my social media I posted. I'm like, oh, here's a character I'm going to include in my next book. I can't put him in there. It would just completely change the book. Add not even just more work, but it would be an unwieldier narrative with that included. So I had to get rid of him, even though from the start he was part of the mix. But I realized, no, as much as I would like to include this character, I can't.
Right.
I
Yeah.
went to be professional that one time and cut someone out and think ahead a bit. But I still had 50 pages done thinking this guy gonna come into the picture.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think what you discovered with Pepper at the skate park, that element, as I brought it up earlier. Like I think that's a great little piece of like you know, character for Pepper in terms of how like her peers see her, how she reacts to it. Like what a wonderful little discovery about her.
It's a. I think there was can't remember which review we got advanced reviews. Maybe Kirkus that they mentioned that being like a trans allegory. Pepper just being involved in a sport where people think she has an advantage of because she's being different, which
Yeah.
was not planned from the start. But as I was writing it, realized, oh, it's that.
Yeah.
Obviously, because I am not a trans person myself, it's like I can't lean into this too heavily because I'm not writing my own experience. But
Yeah.
as I was writing, it's like, no, but this has to be there. Like this is just a natural course of how this thing would happen with everything else that I wrote around it. 2 + 2 = 5 kind of thing.
Right.
Like I set these things up and the skateboard and the vampire and how the vampire lore and mythology works in my story added up. And the natural conclusion was that this trans allegory, so to say, could be a trans allegory. Some people might not recognize it as. If some people do, I'm happy for them. Especially if they find it relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought it was a wonderful element in the story. At like I had mentioned earlier, but yeah, I just really find the whole story I absolutely loved. I thought Pepper and Anna were great. I'd love to hang out with them again in another 224 pages or whatever it might be. But yeah, Balazs, I thought I think it's fantastic. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Wolfpitch. I'm now a huge fan of A Bite of Pepper, and I really I'm so glad you reached out and were able to come back on the podcast to talk about it. But it'll be out August 26th.
26th, yeah. Paperback and hardcover. Very, very excited that I have a hardcover coming out as well.
That's
I don't know
awesome.
if they sell it in the UK, but in America, definitely both
Okay.
formats. I just always like hardcovers. I just like holding a hardcover book in my hand. I'm very happy that I have my own now.
That's fantastic.
Nothing
so
wrong
listeners,
with the paperback, especially the top shelf paperbacks. I think they're very, very good quality. Love them. Just personally. Childhood dream.
there is something nice about holding a hardback, like your book in your hands,
Fancy pants edition. So yeah.
Listeners, I'll put links in the show notes so you can follow Balazs on social media. But as he said, don't go too far back into the past.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Nothing dodgy there. I barely paused. I struggled. No one pays attention to me.
But I'll put a link in the show notes for the episode so you can pick up a copy of A Bite of Pepper. And yeah, if you haven't yet, please, I highly recommend pick up Wolfpitch. It is awesome. Even if you think that this isn't going to be your type of book, chances are there is somebody in your life that loves comics, that love graphic novels, that this is going to be a story that they want to read, whether or not it's A Bite of Pepper or Wolfpitch. But yeah, A Bite of Pepper, August 26th. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I loved it. So, Balazs, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast to talk about it.
Thank you very much for having me. And thank you, everyone who managed to get through this episode and just listening to all this nonsense I was saying.
A shout out to my brother Bobby, the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes. Bobby, thanks for listening. Listeners, thank you for listening. Yeah, if you like the podcast, rate, review us, do all the things they tell you to do for podcasts because it does help. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.